you want to stop screen sharing, Mel, while we just do the intro? Hello, everybody. So I'm just going to pause. Welcome, everybody. For those of you who I've not met before, my name's Elaine Rawlcock, and I'm the co-founder and director of business development consultancy Elevate. Elevate was set up in the midst of a pandemic, because why wouldn't you launch a brand new business in a pandemic? And over the last 5 months, my business partner Katie Robson and I have been overwhelmed with support from the business community, and one of the companies that we engaged with very early on and have been a huge support to us throughout is Bruntwood Works. So those of you who are already Bruntwood Works customers will know quite a bit about them. Those of you who perhaps aren't as close to them will see them very much as being a property company, serviced workspaces, all kinds of different offerings there for their customers. But you're perhaps not as aware of what's been going on behind the scenes over the last year. So they did briefly close their doors, but have been able to stay pretty much open throughout. They were one of the first organisations to go through all the COVID secure processes with the British Safety Council to make sure they could open up those spaces to people who needed them. They also brought forward a programme that they'd been working on for a little while called Spark, and this webinar forms part of that programme. And the idea behind the Spark programme was a way of them still being able to engage with customers and offer support even when they weren't physically in the buildings. And that has meant one-to-one advisory sessions, webinars, interviews, all kinds of different things on all kinds of different topics, and we're really pleased to have been able to support that programme and also to have benefited from it. One of the things that we're really excited about working on is what we call Peer Networks programme, and that's funded through Bays and the Business Growth Hub, and it brings together leaders of small companies to share problems and look ahead to hopefully reopening and a much busier, easier 2021 than what we've been going through recently. So out of the back of that Peer Networks programme, a number of themes came up in the discussions that kind of almost regardless of what sector people were in, what stage they were at of their business, there was things that they were concerned about that they would like some more information on. So we put together this series of 6 webinars to explore those themes in a little bit more detail. So the first 2 that we covered, we talked around getting to net zero with Phil Corbell at the Carbon Literacy Project. Last week we had Heather Gray from Bruntwood Works talking about the future of the workplace, and I'm delighted today that we're going to be joined by Mel Hill, who is a digital marketing expert. Now, I've had the pleasure of working very closely with Mel for some time. We were desk buddies back at Pro Manchester, going back kind of just over a year. Mel was the person who made sure that, you know, all of our comms in all formats looked and sounded how it should. And she went freelance, I'm going to say a year ago, but I will check with Mel that we're actually at that anniversary date. And when we decided to set up Elevate, Katie and I knew that, you know, marketing was something that we were absolutely not going to have a whirl at doing on our own. We needed that professional support and came immediately to Mel. So she's helped set up the entire Elevate brand over the last 5 months. And more recently, she's also started working for me in my role as a director on JCI UK's national board. So without further ado then, Mel, I'll pass over to you to do your little introduction and either correct or confirm my dates as to how long you've now been freelancing.
It has been a year, you are correct. I wasn't the person that launched a business in a pandemic. I was the person who launched a business a month before a pandemic. So that was good. But yeah, it's actually gone from strength to strength. Like you've mentioned, I've had great support since I started. I've been doing marketing now for 9 years for a variety of companies, both small and large. And in that time, I was in-house for a lot of it. In that time, I really learned kind of what a brand is, how to develop a brand, and how to develop, more importantly, in my opinion, a tone of voice. And that's what I want to touch on today, is how important it is to develop that tone of voice and really get exactly who your brand is down on paper. And, you know, it doesn't have to be anything formal as such, but once you understand your brand, you'll find you can develop it a lot better.
Wonderful, that's great, and a really nice introduction to kind of what the focus of the session will be. Before we get into that bit of kind of getting it a bit more into the detail of how to establish that brand, and as I say, if anyone's got kind of particular questions, do just drop those in the chat box and we'll pick them up towards the end of the session. But as somebody who say, launched and then suddenly went into a pandemic, I've definitely seen from my side that emphasis on an online brand, there was companies who already got how important it was that were doing a lot of work in that space. Then there was companies who literally weren't doing anything and very quickly had to think about it. In the kind of the clients that you work with, how much of a shift has there been towards their focus online? Or a lot of people you're working with, they were already doing stuff and it's been amplifying that, or people have been like overhaul, start from scratch?
There has been a surprising shift, to be honest. One of my most surprising clients at the moment is actually a school. And they've obviously had to go fully digital for the children that are currently in the school. But one thing that they're really worried about is the capacity in order to get children into their school in September. So they're utilising my skills and making themselves a lot more online and a lot more visible online in order to encourage people in the area to apply for their primary school. It's in a catchment area that's got some very good schools in it, so there's already big competition, and usually their open days kind of give a bit of a wow factor because it is a lovely school inside. But without that wow factor, they're struggling quite a bit to because they're kind of off the beaten track of the kind of standard schools. It's a fairly new one, so yeah, that's one example of how individuals have had to shift, definitely. And then there's just been other clients as well where they've unfortunately had to let marketing individuals go just because they didn't have the spend or the budget anymore in hospitality, for example. So then they've taken on a freelancer instead.
And it's, I think the hospitality is probably, it's one that we'd have expected to have to change quite dramatically in terms of what it was doing. But yeah, obviously some of that move has sadly been that, they can't retain permanent staff. And it's been wonderful to see kind of right across Manchester that kind of collective support of people, that going to freelancers, people moving from permanently employed to doing other things. And hospitality is always a really supportive industry. The schools probably comes as a little bit more of a surprise to people that you just don't think about them as business. You don't think about them having that recruitment model, but in terms of a footfall and being able to see it, then the school is literally the front door there to be able to showcase all of that. So some really interesting brands that you're working on there. So just before we dive into the presentation then, can you give us a bit of an overview of the range of services that you offer? Because I think I'm very much, we've had this conversation before when you're like, you could have recommended me for that. And I'm like, I just didn't think, because you kind of forget how all-encompassing digital marketing is, that just the range of skills that you have to be able to support your clients. So can you just give us like a little overview of the kind of things that you'd get involved in?
Yeah, so I can get involved in anything digital marketing, really. So whether that's web copy, online copywriting, SEO, all the way up to kind of paid social, organic social, PPC, which is Google Ads, anything that's digital and on screen, including like for yourselves, I've created kind of documents that you can send to clients and things like that. Anything that's got your brand on that's digital, including logos, I can create basically, and I do for clients. It works really well because some clients like yourselves like to have me do everything. So almost like I did in my in-house roles for small businesses, where kind of there's only one person and I do the whole remit. But then others that are larger organizations prefer me to just do their social media or just do their social ads, just do their PPC, that kind of thing. So it's very, very varied, but it's kind of how I like it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you've touched on there, and it's one of the reasons why, we've been so delighted to work with you, is you do feel like an extension of the team, that, there's things that we can put out to you that will be things that you'll physically do, but it's also having that expert on hand to be like, Mel, what do I do? Like, how does this work? Those kind of little questions. And it feels like we have that support within the team, obviously, of a business of a size that is not going to have its own marketing department. Fab. That is really useful. So what we're going to do now is a process that I've actually been through with Mel, with my JCI UK hat on. So we're a voluntary not-for-profit membership organisation with a focus on kind of developing young leaders. And one of the things that Mel did with us was to kind of work out, what our brand should be, because it had been lots of different volunteers working on lots of different channels. And this process was really critical to making sure that we got that brand voice right. So I'm really pleased that Mel's agreed to share the overview of how all that works with us, because I know it is incredibly valuable content that you do and that you work with your clients. So really appreciate you sharing some of your secrets with us today. Anyone who's kind of watching it, as I say, this is going to be recorded, so this is possibly a section that you might want to play back when you've got a few of your team around you to start working through those things. And I know Mel will be more than happy to kind of offer advice to people if it's something that you're wanting to pick up in more detail as well. If you do have specific questions as we go, drop them into the chat and we'll pick them up. So if you'd like to start your screen share, Mel, we can jump into the presentation.
Has that worked?
That worked beautifully.
Great, perfect. As Alona mentioned, the more interactive this can be, the better. I understand that people don't necessarily want to pipe up and say, any specifics about their business or anything like that. But if you could, it does make the whole kind of workshop a lot better. So what I would usually do with clients in this instance is send out a questionnaire for between 6 and 10 of your workers to fill out in order for us to be able to bring, really bring it down and see what your brand is kind of about and how your brand is perceived both internally and externally. So the first thing that I look at is kind of why does your business exist? There is usually 4 main pillars to why your business exists. It's you found yourself a USP. Either you were looking for a service and it wasn't available, so you thought, oh, I may do that, or the service was available, but you think it wasn't to the standard that you think it should be. For example, you may solve a problem for an individual. You've got specific goals that you want to meet, and in order to meet those goals, you're created a business, and then you're helping other people to help achieve those goals. And then also your business exists in order to provide a service. So that could be anything from insurance to, like myself, SEO, or like Alona, where they're providing business development. So it's this is a real varied kind of why, let's say, but it is a really important first question to ask yourself, because we need to know what it is you're doing differently in order for you to be able to market yourself differently and not just be the same as everybody else. And then one good place to start is by looking at 4 different competitors, I would suggest. So sometimes this isn't necessarily you've not necessarily got a direct competitor. Sometimes you do something so niche that you've not necessarily got one competitor. A good example of this is Alona and Katie at Elevate. They may have competitors in the city where such as Pro Manchester, who do similar events and things, but then they've also got JCI Manchester as a competitor because they provide the personal development side of things. So by finding these 4 different competitors, you're able to then look at what they do well. Now, whether you want to look specifically at how they do their social media well, how they do their marketing generally well, by focusing on your competitors and seeing what their tone of voice is, you can really kind of drill down to see how and why they engage their audience so well. Now, I would recommend here using competitors who you believe do marketing well and who have got good engagement online, simply because, or to be fair, if you're looking at a competitor and you think they're not doing that well and that's not getting any engagement, then you can learn lessons from that as well. So you need to really look at why it is you're looking at that competitor and whether that's going to benefit you and whether that's going to benefit your business. Because by looking at these individuals, you're not trying to be them or emulate them. You're taking small parts out of their organization that they do well and implementing them into your own. So this isn't about imitating people that are doing something well. This isn't about, taking a viral tweet and thinking, I'm just going to do that exact same thing again, because it doesn't work. The viral tweets work because it's niche. and that's just not something necessarily that works.
I think one of the things I found really interesting when we went through some of this competitor process with you is to kind of think, oh, who's my competition? And it sounds almost a little bit adversarial, as like this is someone I'm going to fight for work, but actually that it's your competitors can be doing elements of what you do, but they might actually be people that you collaborate with. So JCI Manchester that you mentioned, great, thing there that, I still run training for them. I'm still involved in the organisation, but actually when you look at the services that we offer, they are technically a competitor, but just because we're not actively competing, there was still a really interesting brand for us to look at in the way that they position themselves.
Exactly. So that's kind of what I was touching on there. So you've not necessarily got a direct competitor, but it's about seeing what people that do a similar thing to you and seeing what it is they do and what it is they do well, more importantly.
Have also have just somebody pop up in the chat to tell us a little bit about what their business does. And Chantal has a stationery business for adults with light sensitivities and neurodiversities. So absolutely that niche brand there that you're talking about, but whilst there may not be another, I'm guessing here, another stationery business who does exactly that for that audience, we'd presumably look at, what are other stationery businesses doing, as a whole, and then what are other organisations doing with that similar target audience.
Yeah, exactly. So here you would look at maybe Staples or someone like that, those kind of stationery businesses that are large, but then also smaller ones. I know there's a few in the city centre that have got some nice marketing, but then like Alona said, it's about looking at into different organisations, even charities, and see how they speak to their audience with the light sensitivities and neurodiversities. It's even small things with that, with your marketing, like when you're posting something on Twitter, ensuring you include the alternative text to ensure that your audience is seeing everything that you're posting, and well, not necessarily seeing, but obviously it helps them when they've got a reader on their phone to see what it is you've posted. Just small things like that, but by looking at those competitors that are offering different things, not necessarily just stationery, you can see what it is they're doing well and how that audience is reacting and responding. And then we come on to the personality traits of your clients and customers. So in Chantal's case there, she's got a very clear personality trait for her customers. They're neurodiverse. That's something that she needs to bear in mind with every piece of content that she puts out. But this could be something really minor, like we believe our audience loves to read, for example. And the reason that we believe that is because we've spoken with 15 clients and all of them always chat to us about reading and books, etc. So by doing that, you can then almost have kind of almost an inside joke when you're doing your social media, and that could include like literary references and things like that. So it's about really understanding your audience, and these personality traits could be, like I just mentioned, anything there from reading to keeping active and fit to some people's audience may be individuals who like to watch the television as well. So then you need to look into like, right, what's been on the television that's of interest. Like Innocent Smoothies, for example, do this really well when RuPaul's Drag Race is on. They understand that their clients, their consumers, they watch that, and they do the same with the Bake Off as well. They understand exactly who their consumers are, so they almost live tweet at the same time that program's on, and they really engage their audience while they're doing it, and it works really well. So this isn't just about selling a product. It's not about, so Innocent Smoothies, while that's on, don't post pictures of smoothies. They don't post a link to purchase smoothies or a voucher to purchase smoothies or anything like that. It's just about engaging an audience and creating a community, because that's what you're doing here. It's all about creating that online community and online presence in order for you to reach a better audience. And then once you're reaching that audience and you've got that follow base, that's when you can then put that messaging out. So it's not like I say when the Bake Off's on, it's on a Monday at 12 o'clock when people are on their lunch and craving a smoothie, for example, or they're just about to nip out to Tesco, they see an Innocent Smoothie ad, and then it encourages them to purchase that. So it's about how we build up that client database and then utilizing that database. So it's not necessarily about constantly pushing out sales messages. It's about seeing what it is your customer base really want and really value. And then that's how you can draw them in. And then that's when you make the sale. So yeah, these personality traits, I would recommend doing between 6 and 10. I do think 6 actually does work well, just because I have done it up to 10 for clients, but it can get a little bit cloudy. So I would recommend sticking with the 6.
I think one of the things that's really interesting that you touch on there is digital marketers can have this perception that you're very creative, you make things look pretty, that it's all around the kind of, the graphic and the feel and the tone of voice and everything. And it's easy to forget that is very data driven. So Innocent Smoothies, I mean, I love them as a brand, and as you say, their social media, it's very chatty, it's very engaging, it doesn't feel particularly salesy. But the level of data that's gone into that to be like, that's our target audience, this is what they're watching, this is when they're most likely to buy, that is behind the scenes, it's a really rigorous commercial model that just looks light and fluffy. So Mel Fox has just asked if you can give a few more examples of possible traits that you would look for in your types of personalities.
Yeah, so let me have a think. So different personality traits, it literally can be anything. So it can be somebody that's interested, is your client somebody or customer somebody who is quite serious and very professional and likes to keep things tight and serious, and doesn't want you to joke, doesn't want any colloquialisms on your social feeds, for example. Or is it somebody who's the polar opposite to that? Is it somebody who, can be professional when they want to be, but at the same time, they also do enjoy a joke. They enjoy, some camaraderie and things like that. So it's about kind of thinking, almost what we're doing here is we're personifying your brand. So if you think about yourself or your clients or your colleagues, everybody you speak to every day within the organization, you think about their personality traits, what it is that keeps them in the organization, what it is that stops them moving to a different organization, that makes you really love that brand. What is it that you think it is? You think it's the caring side of the brand, for example. So if a brand shows that they've got a great culture and they really care, Auto Trader is one that does this really well. They really show off their culture brilliantly on social, and for me that would make me think that's a great place to work. And as somebody who would work there, you would almost be proud to work there. They're really involved in their community, they get their team really involved, they develop their team, and that's another great personality trait. Is it, are you somebody who lifts somebody up? Is your brand somebody who's lifting somebody up? Is it somebody who wants individuals to develop? So is this helping a little more, do you think? Or is it, are you thinking a bit more specific? Or perfect.
That sounds great. And I know we are going to come into some kind of illustrations, because I think when you first see it, you're like, it can literally be anything. But I know we're going to work through an example which will bring that to life a little bit as well.
And that's why this is great to discuss with colleagues as well, getting between, like I said, between 6 and 10 people together, either in a room or just getting them to answer a quick questionnaire about who it is your brand is and what the personality is. That helps you to define these personality traits, because it's not necessarily going to be just you as the marketer that knows this. So I think it's really good to have somebody. I did this in a really large organization, and we had the CEO, the receptionist, we had the cleaner, we had a client, and then we had 2 kind of mid-level colleagues. And they were the individuals who answered the questionnaire. And it was really interesting to see the different aspects and different angles that these different people and how they perceived the brand in a different way. The receptionist perceived it in a very different way to the marketing exec, for example, because it really helped the marketing exec to then develop the brand, because they were like, I actually didn't know that people thought that of the brand, and I really like that people think this of the brand. So it then developed online. So that's why I think it's really great to speak to different people from different aspects of the brand. So then you come on to your brand voice, and I think these are really really good ways to start with your brand voice. So this, as you can see, these are scales. So, you know, this is another thing to give when you do a questionnaire, for example, if you can give this to different colleagues and just get them to kind of circle where they think you sit. You know, you may sit here completely professional. If you're a law firm, for example, you may feel like you're completely professional, but also if you're a law firm, for example, working in family law, then you know, you've got to have that friendly aspect of it as well. Otherwise, you know, in these complex circumstances that people may be using your brand, they do want to feel, you know, they've got that friendly nature. So you know, you may find somebody puts it here, but then you may find that the CEO puts you here. So that's where you can really develop your brand voice. So these are just, you know, are you informative or authoritative? Is your brand warm or cold, inspiring or repetitive? Professionals repeated here, but I think it's important because these are two different aspects of a scale, you know, two different aspects of professionalism. You know, online, are you going to be professional or are you going to be colloquial? You know, innocent probably sits here, for example. Well, probably here, really, when it comes to colloquialisms. But, you know, elevate, for example, probably sits around, I would say, probably sits around here. You know, Alona and Katie may disagree with me, and that's the whole point of these exercises.
Oh, brand, well, you can tell us what to say. But I think it was exactly that, and it was easier in a way because you knew, Katie and I, that when we set up Elevate, we knew that we wanted Elevate to reflect who we were individually as well. But it's definitely that we wanted it to reflect who we are in our professional lives, and I think you're absolutely right there, that it's, you know, it's, we still want it to feel like it's a company brand. We're talking about, you know, businesses, we're talking about development, we're talking about stuff that's going on in the region. So we don't want to be like super professional, but also it would be nowhere near as the colloquial voice that you might get if you were just chatting to Katie and I individually. That there's that balance there that you've been able to help us find.
Yeah. And I think that balance is really important. Apologies, my AirPods have just died, so if the microphone's gone strange, then can you still hear me okay?
I can still hear you fine.
So yeah, and then I think this comes back to what I was discussing as well before. Are you entertaining or are you salesy? I would recommend nobody sits here. But the importance of this exercise is, if you are here, how do you become a bit more here? So if you know, if people do perceive your marketing as very salesy, if all you're doing online is selling, you know, tickets to events or something like that, then people aren't going to engage, are not going to be interested. But you know, if you're providing some entertainment, and by entertainment that doesn't mean being silly or anything like that. Entertainment, you know, it can be anything. We're entertained by Charles Dickens, for example, and you know, it's sometimes it can be you know, quite hard reading, for example, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you know, you sat there and you're putting clowns on your social media feed or anything like that. It's just about entertaining your audience, and by entertaining your audience, you're then keeping them engaged and you're keeping them following. You're stopping them from unfollowing, you're stopping them from unsubscribing from your database. You know, in this world where everything's online, data is your best friend, really. Whether that data is on social media, whether it's in you know, in MailChimp or anything like that, or on HubSpot or whatever it is that you use, it is your best friend, and holding on to that data and retaining that data is so important. For example, with, you know, with Bruntwood, even sending this out, and then Elevate sending it out as well. You know, having that database at your beck and call means that you can then provide your users with you know, sparks, like Alona mentioned earlier. So then the results from this is, then you can then put down on paper what your results are. Now, the reason I've put this in here as a blank is simply because we'll send this to you once this is finished. So then you can then put this in yourselves. So then once you've kind of determined whether you're professional, authoritative, warm, inspiring, serious, complex, then you can put these things down here. And then that can help you then understand who you are as an individual. So once you've got exactly who your brand personality is, I always recommend to people to then convey this into a real person. So in order to convey this into a real person, I would look at the personality aspects that you've got there. And this could be a celebrity, so then everybody knows who it is. This could be specific clients. If you work in an organization where everybody knows who your customers and clients are. For example, when Alona and myself were at Pro Manchester, I did this with them, and we did it with the membership organisations. So we kind of used most membership organisations that went to Pro Manchester events had one or two individuals that we all knew quite well. So we kind of used those individuals as the people that we would specifically be talking to. And it just really helps you. And that's why getting this brand personality down on paper, it'll help you to understand who your audience is. So then we look at what the personality traits of your business are. Now, this is an example that I did with Alona and the JCI UK team. So they came up with quite a few different personality traits here. So they had socially conscious, ambitious, serious, resistant to change, caring, and also complex. So your brand's personality traits are more often than not quite a mixed bag, just like our personalities. So for example, in a social aspect, I'm probably a lot less professional than I am in this instance, for example. And just because you're a professional outfit doesn't necessarily mean you can't have a joke, as I mentioned earlier. So what was really interesting about JCI's example was that they were socially conscious, yet they were resistant to change. So usually these two things wouldn't really fit, because if you're socially conscious, then obviously you need to change in order to kind of improve your carbon footprint, for example. You need to make these changes in order to continuously be socially conscious. So these personality traits can be flexible. It doesn't mean, right, we're resistant to change, therefore we are absolutely resistant to change. It just means, they believe their audience to be resistant to change, but at the same time, with them being socially conscious, they were also aware then, okay, maybe they are resistant to change. Maybe if we want to make changes in the organization, we do it slowly. We do it with them on board. We do it by discussing it with them and opening up the conversation, rather than just being like, look, we've rebranded. It's about speaking to the members and things like that, and speaking to the people on the different boards at different in different cities.
It was so interesting to see this when you put it together for us, because I think what it really brought home to us was the variety of people within our audience, and how they might view the organisation. So as an organisation, we're over 100 years old, and there's certain elements of that have gone through, world wars, massive societal change, and the essence of JCI has kind of remained. And there was, I think, this fear as we went through the pandemic and things changed very much in terms of delivery, from being kind of very face-to-face in events to very online. It's like, we need to hang on to what makes us JCI, and we need to protect that. But at the same time, we're an organisation that is literally about creating positive change. Like, that's what we do. That we had to have this socially conscious angle, and seeing those two things together was really useful for us to kind of work out, right, okay, well, what is the stuff that can't change? What's like our guiding principles? And actually, one of the key things that we can do is to help people in a very fast changing world to be able to keep up with it. And seeing those things and having those conversations around, well, is that right? Is that how we want our brand to be perceived? Or are there things that we potentially need to revisit? It was such a useful experience for a brand that's been around for a long time, constantly managed by different people. It was so interesting to see that mix of responses.
And I think what this exercise was really good for with JCI is it's run by a lot of volunteers. So obviously each volunteer will kind of take charge of their own specific role, and often they put out content themselves. So what was really important here was ensuring that content was, the same across the board. So for example, if you've got a marketing individual that's sending things out on social media via email and things like that, is that tone of voice the same as a tone of voice in a proposal? Is that tone of voice the same tone of voice that your business development team are going out and providing to a potential client? And that's why this works really well. It's because it's not just about your kind of online tone of voice, it's about your company's general tone of voice as well. So then this is where we drill down to kind of who is your brand. So then you can really personify your brand in order to help individuals to learn who to speak to across the channels. As mentioned, it could be clients, celebrities, customers, whoever kind of you see fit. I used to work at Forever Manchester, the charity, and we did this with ambassadors, for example. So they're like the patrons of the charity. And we had 2 patrons in our mind all the time whenever we were producing anything, and that was the business development team and the marketing team. So it worked really well. Now, just going back to JCIs here. Oh, sorry, gone the wrong way. You know, they're socially conscious, ambitious, serious, resistant to change, caring and complex. So looking at those traits, this is what we kind of came up with here. So, you know, Michelle Obama, former First Lady, she's very socially conscious, inspiring, ambitious, a feminist who owns a foundation encouraging young people to work on social issues. So she kind of ticked all the boxes for JCI, as did Emma Watson as a UN ambassador and advocate, you know, for all things sustainable fashion and beauty. And just kind of her general demeanor was, you know, who we believe JCI UK kind of really really defined. And then I do find it much better to kind of have 2 females and 2 males when you're doing this, just to really get a really balanced view on it. And then you've got Hugh Jackman. You know, he's a very ambitious individual, and he also owns a foundation which supports educational programs. These people may seem really random, but, you know, once you look at the personality traits and then look at what these individuals have achieved, you know, like John Legend, he's a big advocate of Black rights. He's, you know, a male feminist, pushes the importance of kindness a lot. And that was a big thing for JCI, you know, was, you know, the kind of hashtag be kind situation at the moment. You know, that was a big thing for them. They really wanted to ensure they were part of. And I think somebody like John Legend, to have that kind of in the back of your mind. Now, these individuals aren't necessarily under 40, which is what JCI, you know, where JCI's target market is, but it just kind of allows them to see the personality traits of these individuals. You know, Michelle Obama was still like this when she was 30, for example. You know, she now just goes over the JCI UK threshold, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't speak to that individual who has those personality traits. So these 4 we felt worked really well, and I think the team were happy with these as well, weren't they, Alona?
Yeah, really happy. And I think it's one of those things that we so often define the organisation by the age range of the membership, and that's obviously like so important when we're looking, you know, which channels do we use and developing some of that brand voice. But actually just getting those key traits that it was like, do you know what, would Michelle Obama have wanted to join when she was 25? It's like, well, yeah, those personality traits would still have been there. And then we actually get a lot of people come to the organisation because their employer might see the brand and be like, oh, actually, this would be really good for you. So it was looking again at an audience that we hadn't necessarily thought about in terms of they're not our target market, but actually they might be a really strong referrers for it. That if, you know, if we're speaking to, you know, the people who are leading organisations, if they're bought into JCI and what we do, then actually, you know, there's a massive pool of employees there who could benefit. So it was, again, just really useful to sort out what those traits were and then think about the different people who might actually be engaging with us on the platforms.
Yeah, exactly. So it just helps you really define who it is you are and who your customer and client are. So then, you know, this is, again, I've used JCI's example as I knew Alona wouldn't mind. This is the brand's tone of voice. Apologies, for some reason it's gone a bit strange on the screen. But
I think it's because we had such a mixed bag. We're giving you a tiny amount of space to squeeze them all in.
Yeah, I think so. So your brand's tone of voice will engage with the individual celebrities that we met that have been mentioned, or clients or colleagues, whoever it is that you decide to do it to. And each of these tone of voice traits we believed were associated with these 4 celebrities. You know, friendly, approachable, bold, innovative, informative, inspiring, proud, funny, eager, engaging, safe, helpful, and friendly. Now, obviously, we don't know these individuals personally. This is only what we see on social media, but that's all we can go off with celebrities, unfortunately. So, you know, this is really what JCI wanted to achieve. So therefore, we then personified this tone of voice and these characteristics, because we wanted to leave users and followers feeling inspired, helped, safe, and really eager to hit the ground running with the new findings with JCI, as an example, simply because obviously they provide you with information and, or personal development coaching, for example, and they really wanted you to feel proud of yourself, inspired, informed, after finishing these, after finishing however you'd interacted with JCI. That's how we wanted them to feel. So that was how we kind of developed that tone of voice.
It's a really useful conversation that we had in the few occasions that we've done this kind of brand persona stuff together, was just taking that kind of almost a jump to the end point of like, how do you actually want someone to feel when they've had that experience, whether it's being attending an event, buying a product, engaging with you on social media. That was kind of getting into that mindset really then helped to be able to kind of do the track back to like, right, well, what do we need to do to make sure that you feel that way? And it was a really interesting way of doing it. And I think for JCI, it maybe felt a little bit more natural because of the kind of work that we do, we're in a more commercially focused organisation. You maybe don't have that step back and be like, well, how do I want a business to feel after they've engaged with me? But actually, it's the people within that business that you're going to be building the relationships with.
Exactly, yeah. So obviously now we come on to the kind of Q&A. If anybody's got any questions, if they want to kind of let me know very specifically what they do, similar to what Chantal did, then I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Do you want to stop your screen share there? I've just got Mel's details there. As you said, a couple of you I know have asked in the questions that you'll be able to get slides and content over to you. Everybody loves those slides, Mel, big fan. So if you are happy for us to, I've said we'll send out a copy of those slides. They've also got all of Mel's contact details on there. So, I can, massively recommend as someone who's worked with her for a while, she's well worth having a conversation with, even if it's just to get that initial stuff in place that then gives you something that you can go and take away. So thanks ever so much for allowing us to share those, Mel. So as Mel says, if anyone does have any specific questions that would be useful to you, feel free to drop them in. And in the meantime, I'm going to take advantage of this to kind of ask a couple of questions that I'd be really interested in. And I suppose one of the first things, having done this over the last year when we've gone through this complete chaos, have you seen either your clients or kind of other brands change their voice and the way that they're speaking to people to kind of reflect that we're in a very different place to where we were a year ago? Or have brands kind of really maintained that voice as everything's changed?
I have seen it's been a mixed bag, really. Some have really stood true to who they are, and some have obviously had to pivot their business altogether. For example, I work with a business that does tutoring, and they used to do them one-to-one, face-to-face, or they do them in a group setting for specific age groups. And they've fully pivoted their whole business and moved it fully online, rebranded, brand new website. There's now an online portal for the children that we've created together, and everything's on Zoom now. They're still posting out, things for them to booklets and things like that. But then we've rebranded the booklets and everything, and their tone of voice has completely changed. And, they've gone down there doing Google ads and PPC and things like that. And they've really changed their tone of voice in order to speak to, worried parents. So by changing the tone of voice, previously kind of what they did was, help with 11 plus and then help with GCSE, SATs and things like that, very specific exams. But now their language has had to change, because what parents are actually worried about is that, children in year 2, 3, 4 have fallen behind, where unfortunately they shouldn't have to worry about that, which is what the tutoring company is then, adjusted to kind of being that almost a caring tone of voice, saying, it's not something to worry about, but it is something we can help you with, rather than you absolutely have to get this score on your 11 plus, therefore this is, being quite a direct tone of voice previously.
And I think we can all agree we'll need a little bit more care at the moment than we perhaps did before. Yeah. So we've got a really interesting question here from Mike Kitely. He says, what's your view on paying influencers who have the traits of your brand to accelerate growth, or do you think paying influencers automatically undermines any sincerity of the brand?
I think it really depends. Mark, do you mind telling me what it is that your organisation does? Just, it really depends on what it is you do and what influencers you have in mind. In my opinion, I think micro influencers work much better than your larger scale influencers that have kind of, say, been on Love Island, for example. You know, you've got micro influencers, and these individuals have got between 10 and 100,000 followers on Instagram, for example, and they're much cheaper to use, and they're a lot more sincere. Often they're kind of bloggers for you know, food, if you're in hospitality, for example, or you know, parent bloggers and things like that. And often, if you can define who your audience is and then think about who they, sorry, I'm just reading Mark's reply there, advice firms, so like, oh, okay, understand. So yeah.
So for those of you who might not have seen that pop up, so it's a non-exec and he's advising firms to strictly a learning exercise, but to challenge marketing execs. And I think that's really useful sometimes, that it is that broader picture, because I think it's fair to say influencers have had a bad rep recently, but like anything, you know, there's really, really great examples, and then, you know, when you have an influencer in Dubai in the middle of a pandemic claiming to be working, that is going to get a lot of coverage and a lot of flack. The kind of the micro influencers that you talked about, have you got kind of any examples of brands that have used that quite well?
To be honest, not off the top of my head, just unfortunately.
Which I suppose is the nature of micro-influence, though, isn't it? It's like, we know the big names because we see them, but I think that element of sincerity that Mark mentioned is quite key, that when you say if it's a micro-influencer and they're genuinely passionate about a certain thing and that's what their follower knows them for, they're not going to sell out for a different product. Where if you've got somebody who's got, you know, a level of fame and they'll kind of influence what they're paid for, it's very different.
I think a good example of this is if you look at kind of how Mrs. Hinch developed her brand and her audience. You know, she started out by just being a person that enjoyed to clean and shared her tips, and then the products that she then used, you know, those brands came to her and then, you know, started paying her, for example. But she is a good example of an influencer. While she's now quite large scale, she didn't used to be, so she's probably a lot more expensive than she used to be.
But you've seen that real organic growth, I suppose, haven't you? Like, however big she is and what she's getting paid for, it's true to that route. Fab. So we've got another couple of questions coming through for you. So one that I think will probably resonate with quite a lot of people watching, whether it's because they're new businesses or their existing businesses and budgets are pretty tight at the moment, is if you have a very small budget and wish to generate revenue to increase marketing spend, what's the first thing to try or the place to start? And I'm presuming this will vary massively depending on industry. So Gary, if you can drop into the chat and let us know what industry you're in, that would be useful. But in terms of a general, what's your first place to start without having money to throw at the problem?
I would say organic social media. Organic social media is a great place to start if you've got a low budget, and it's about engaging with other individuals that will help you grow online. So it's about creating an online community. If you're you know, really developing yourself, if you use these, what we've done on this got a brain fog here. You know what
I love that you almost said brain fog. Like, that is sort of frog, such a good image in my mind now.
You know, kind of what we've gone over this afternoon. If you use that and think, right, who are my audience? Who should I be speaking with? Who should I also be following? You know, should I who should I be retweeting? Who should I be replying to? And, you know, if you're replying to organizations that people follow, then they will see that you've replied. For example, they'll look in a thread, which people often do. And if you're making a good point or a valid point and they agree with it, then they'll click on and they'll follow. So I would just do that organic social growth, which is something I can have a chat to you about. I'm more than happy to. If you want to drop me an email, I can give you some tips on that. That's no problem at all.
Thank you, Mel. And I think that's very much been the way that we've kind of grown our brand. It's not something, you know, obviously as a startup, like, we didn't have any money to throw at paid social, at pay-per-click. So it was very much around, you know, that element of community that you just mentioned. So I think it's something that we've definitely seen as being able to put, you know, it is time consuming, that it's looking, responding, getting involved in kind of different conversations. So Gary's come back to say he'd love a chat. So Mel's email address is on the slides that we'll be sending out, so you'll have all of her details there, and we'll drop it in the comments box when this goes out as well. So we do just have a few questions from Chantal again, who will remember with the stationery company. So she's got a few tips that she's asking for. Now obviously this is going to be very specific to kind of different brands, but if there's kind of a few kind of where to start points, is one's around on writing captions and using hashtags, and one around improving Instagram SEO. So are there any kind of good starting points if someone's, you know, we've all got that thing, you're like, you know, you need to post something, you've got Instagram up, and then you're like, right, what am I actually going to put? How do I decide which hashtags to use? You know, what's going to make, you know, I'm sure, you know, as the expert that you are, you get this all the time and you'll want to hit people for saying it, but everyone's like, well, how do I make it go viral? But assuming that that's not what we're aiming for, we're just aiming for like a nice level of engagement on Instagram. Are there any kind of starting points that we could work with?
Yeah, so when it comes to captions, you need to think about who your audience is. You know, is your audience somebody who, you know, wants you to be jokey in your captions, to give information? You know, with kind of a stationery company, I think you can be quite, you know, have quite a fun brand there. You've got the potential to have quite a lot of fun with it. And when it comes to hashtags, I would look at what other brands are using, but also look at what bloggers are using. So I've got some hospitality clients, for example, and we always hashtag kind of MCR foodies, Manchester food bloggers, that kind of thing, just to kind of get them engaging with the brand because they follow that hashtag. Obviously with Instagram changing early last year to allowing you to follow a specific hashtag, using hashtags on Instagram now is really useful, and it is really good because you come up on a general feed. It's not just, you know, you don't have to proactively click into that now. You can follow it like you follow a brand. So I would look at different hashtags, and I saw as well that you'd like your stationery company to be seen as more of a colour company rather than just a stationery company like United Colours of Benetton. If you use your Instagram feed as kind of a palette, if you will, then you can really make this work. So if you want people to engage with your brand and see it look, you know, really pretty and like you say, like a colour palette, then I would recommend Instagram's grid is in 3s. So I would recommend focus on one colour in 3s. So, you know, do all pinks, all greens, all yellows, for example. But if you do them in, you know, where the colours all match nicely and look pretty. I know it sounds really wishy-washy and horrible, but it's what Instagram users want. You know, if they then look onto your site and see the, you know, just this nice aesthetic, then it encourages followers, because Instagram followers, it's all about satisfaction. It's all about you know, seeing something that looks beautiful, looks pretty, whether that be a person in Dubai or whether that be you know, a gorgeous sunset, gorgeous trees, for example. But yeah, when it comes to captions, I think it's really important to get your tone of voice down first, and then but keep them short, keep them one line, or maximum 2, because that's the only bits that people see. Hope that's answered you.
And I think that's a great place to kind of pull together, because I think what's really come through is, whilst that's very specific advice in some way to that brand, what we can see is it's getting that brand voice right first of all, that competitor analysis of, you know, what are other people doing, what's working, and being clear about the platforms that you're going to use. Because I think what we sometimes see is brands who are like, right, I've got this, and then it's exactly the same content against like 4 platforms that's not going to work in the same way. So yeah, just getting that kind of back to basics. What's your brand? What do you want to say? You know, how does your audience want to get that information or that content from you is really useful. So thanks ever so much for asking so many questions. Really useful to have those to kind of bring some of what we've chatted about to life. We will send those slides out to you, so you've got a chance to go through them. And as I say, this video will be up on Bruntwood Works' YouTube channel within the next day or so you've got an opportunity to watch it back if you want to kind of go through that process again. We will be back next week for the next Lunch and Learn in the Bruntwood Works Spark programme. We're going to be joined by Jess Jackson at GC Angels, and she's going to be talking about how do you balance organic growth with seeking investment and some of the things that you might want to think about in the early stages of doing that. I'm also incredibly excited to be able to let you know that the Spark Summit is now live. Some of you may already have seen some of this on social, but it's being streamed on the 25th of March. It's a half-day event and the speaker lineup is incredible. So we have John Roberts, who's the founder of AO. We have David McDowell, who is the CEO of Brewdog. We have Rimi and Manav, who are the founders of Love Raw. They're going to be talking about turning down investment on Dragon's Den and building their brand up afterwards. We've got the artistic director from the Royal Exchange Theatre. We've got people from PKI, from Jaguar Land Rover, like literally just the most amazing brands and inspirational talks and stories that will come out of that event. So do pop onto Bruntwood Works' website, have a look at that Spark page, and there's details there for you to be able to book onto that event. So thank you once again for joining us. Thank you once again, Mel. Incredibly useful session, and I can see from the comments everyone is very keen to be able to get cracking and take that away and put it into practice. So please do, if you start putting these things into practice, tag Bruntwood Works, tag Mel Hill, tag Elevate Gem as you're getting that stuff out on your social, because we'd love to see what you're all up to. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody.
And everything as well, everybody.